Oyo boyos! So, one of my favorite videos on YouTube is this 3-episode series called Lord of the Rings, but it's D&D, by XP to Level 3. As the title suggests, he writes a narrative where the events of Lord of the Rings are put into the context of a D&D campaign. Surprisingly, he's not made more of these. And considering the surprising success of my own video talking about the voice actors of Inuyasha, I figured a blend of these ideas might be fun to do. Also, keep in mind, as I'm most personally familiar with 5th edition D&D, that'll be the version I make these parallels to. Also, I may cover some encounters in greater detail than others, mainly just for time's sake. So, our story begins with 2 friends, who will be our DM and our Kagome player. Our DM has been playing D&D for a while and really wants to run her own campaign. And she also really wants her friend, who's new to D&D, to see what it's all about. The DM wants her friend to be kind of a fish out of water in-universe. And with our player's fascination with the mid to late 90s, she asks the DM, well, what if my character is from the present day and she's put into something like the past? The DM loves this idea and begins writing the world. And I guess I should take a moment to talk about the type of character Kagome is going to play in this game. Our player for her is, like I said, new to D&D and wants to play something cool, but also really doesn't know how spell slots work and doesn't really want to deal with any of that. She decides to write Kagome as a fighter. She wants to use a bow, but she also wants healing abilities. She considers doing a paladin build, but she also notices that paladins have lots of armor, which she doesn't feel Kagome would have. I should mention here that although she's the newest to D&D in this group, she is big on the roleplay aspect. Like, to the point where she will make decisions, even those against her own best interests, if she thinks it makes more sense in the narrative. She essentially roleplays to a fault, which is why Kagome's build is pretty sparse. She has a lot of skills like perception, insight, anything with knowing or history, being from another world and having the history with her, but her survival in a campaign might be a detriment. But for now, things are going to be alright. While most games start with like 3 or 4 players and 1 DM, at first, it's just these 2. The DM is fairly new and doesn't want to be overwhelmed right away with all sorts of abilities and other players. But as she's finalizing her main lore document, she figures, well, we could use 1 more, and she calls up her boyfriend, who will be our Inuyasha player, to join the campaign. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, the Inuyasha player is the DM's boyfriend? Wouldn't it make more sense for him to be in a relationship with the Kagome player, especially knowing where this narrative goes? Well, if you want the in-universe explanation, this is mostly why the relationship seems to go nowhere for a majority of the show. Like, don't get me wrong, both players love role-playing, and the narrative is super compelling and sweet. They also just feel kinda awkward romancing each other in front of their significant other and best friend respectively. Anyway, Inuyasha's player is reading the lore document and gets really excited. He's currently playing another campaign where their characters are a bit higher level, and death is more common, so he has this backup character he realizes would fit the setting really well. The thing is, he's already set to level 10, as the other game he's in has been going on for a considerable while. As he's giving his backstory to the DM, she's like, this is a level 1 character, right? And he goes, ah shit, you're right. But he's also really attached to this backstory, so he tells the DM that she should give him some sort of magic item that restricts his abilities, and he can get his special sword later in the game. Thus, we get the Beads of Subjugation, and the Tetsaiga is hidden and inaccessible at the moment. I guess I should talk about the build Inuyasha's going to be rolling, right? I envision him as a totem barbarian for his first 3 levels, right when he can get the Spirit of the Bear, reflavored as Spirit of the Wolf, or Dog, I guess would make more sense. Speaking of which, there's a lot of flavor going on in Inuyasha's toolkit. He insists that the only weapon he wants for the whole game to be this sword he inherited from his father. Instead of getting new swords, maybe I can get different techniques through this sword. Anyway, it's 3 levels in Barbarian before he'll eventually pick up Fighter for the rest of the game to get all those sweet extra attacks. Near the end of their session 0, our DM gives the preliminary story. A lot of it is ripped directly from Inuyasha's backstory, that he was in love with a priestess who showed him a magical artifact, betrayed him, and thus sealed him to a tree. The DM even goes into detail about how the priestess herself dies after the event, taking the artifact with her in death. We jump to the present, and the DM gives the backstory of Kagome, how she's in school and lives a pretty normal life tending to her family's shrine. As the evening draws to a close, the DM says Kagome looks into the family shrine and encounters a demon, who we know as Miss Centipede, who attacks Kagome, taking her back in time, before Kagome suddenly finds herself at the bottom of the well, and that ends the night. So next session, the DM has been reading through each of the players' backstories, especially Inuyasha's. She tells her friends that she wants the characters to get together in-game. She's texting each of them, making sure they're both okay with ideas, making sure they're both on board with the idea, and ensuring them that she doesn't feel weird about the whole thing since, after all, it's just a game. The players seem to be on board, but Inuyasha, who knows his partner to be a storyteller, wants a proper in-game reasoning above all. The DM smiles to herself and begins to plan. So she's looking through Inuyasha's huge backstory, featuring details about his past, his brother, his past relationship with Kikyo, his upbringing as a half-demon, his desire to become human, being overcome after the betrayal of Kikyo, thus wanting to become a demon. There's a lot to work with. But it's not quite book-length thorough. Inuyasha leaves Kikyo's betrayal vague, and this gives our DM the idea for who will eventually become our main villain. But that comes later. So what if, when Kikyo died, her soul went to Kagome? Wouldn't that be interesting? Anyway, next session, and Inuyasha's player is asking if they should roll initiative considering the centipede demon. But the DM decides to jump into more of a dialogue, describing Kagome escaping the centipede, essentially off-screen, and seeing Inuyasha on the tree. She's describing Inuyasha as we see him on screen, conveying how peaceful he seems, locked in his sleep, and kinda implies Kagome should interact with him somehow. She feels like she might be kind of railroading the encounter, but she doesn't really know an easier way to do it with him being trapped and sealed to the tree. Kagome's player, not really knowing what to do, asks if she can maybe talk to him to awaken him. She asks Inuyasha to roll a wisdom save, to which Inuyasha fails, and remains asleep. Kagome then tries to physically interact with him, to which this time the wisdom save succeeds. And now she writes from Inuyasha's perspective, describing Kagome as we see her in the show, highlighting specifically to the players that she looks just like Kikyo in his eyes. Now, Kagome doesn't know Inuyasha's whole backstory, despite it being in their shared Google Doc. She chose to not look at it to be more out of depth, but Inuyasha's player is losing his mind. He starts playing up this attitude of, are you going to undo this spell? Are you coming to finish the job, Kikyo? Etc. Kagome, also loving the roleplay, starts firing back how she has no clue what he's on about. And it brings the DM great joy. Our DM is much more into the RP aspect of the game, and doesn't really have much in terms of planned combat. But now that introductions are out of the way, she's willing to try. She brings back the centipede and says she's looking at Kagome with an unending hunger in her eyes. So they roll initiative, and the DM, who is still all about the story, tells Inuyasha to treat his build at this point as if he's level 5. Like, not at full strength, but not yet brought down, as she has a planned encounter to depower him. Inuyasha's player is cool with it, but asks the DM if she's certain, because he doesn't want to trivialize the encounter. But the DM is like, this is the first encounter. It's kind of meant to be a little trivial. And they get into combat. Inuyasha is telling Kagome all these things she could do, but Kagome is deep into the roleplay. Maybe a little too much. So she describes how she runs away, and as one could imagine, Miss Centipede pursues Kagome, going for a slashing attack that proceeds to pull the jewel out of Kagome's body, to which Inuyasha and Kagome's players are in full shock, like jaws to the floor. Inuyasha, who knows this magic item from his backstory, knows the encounter is going to get even harder if he doesn't kill this thing, so he proceeds to eviscerate her, with the gem falling to the ground. The DM describes an older priestess taking it, trying to hide it from Inuyasha, whose player goes, oh yeah, I guess I'd be trying to take it myself at this point. And before he can, the priestess gives him the beads of subjugation, and the DM describes how Inuyasha feels weaker and weaker to the point he can't take it as easily as he'd want. The DM then spends some time describing the lore of how this priestess is Kaede, younger sister of Kikyo, who's protected the village since the incident all those years ago. She talks about the village and what there is to do around there, also implying it'd be a good place for a home base, before describing how a demon crow steals the jewel somehow. Kagome asks, wait, since I have a bow, can I try to shoot it down? To which the DM asks for an attack roll, to which Kagome gets a 1. The players both assume it's just a miss until the DM describes the hit as a bullseye that not only explodes the bird, but also the jewel inside. She describes the shards going all over the sky, going to all parts of the land. Then she hits them with the classic, and that is where we're going to end tonight's game. Both players are in complete shock. Kagome is seeing DnD for herself for the first time and is itching to play more. In character, Inuyasha is furious, but as a player, he's excited to finally get a campaign going. He asks the DM if she needs help writing encounters, but says he understands if she wants to keep it a surprise, to which the DM asks for help for one particular stat block, Sesshomaru. his older brother. Inuyasha's player spends the time between sessions writing all of his abilities, even ones that don't make a whole lot of sense at the moment, like the Tensega's healing ability, or Aun, who the DM will promptly forget about until quite a few sessions later. He also makes a stat block for a creature called Jockin, who he explains is Sesshomaru's servant. He's not very powerful, but has a lot of side abilities that help in the RP, which he knows the DM will enjoy. It doesn't start with him, though. Not yet. The DM starts with roleplay in the village. She describes Kagome dressing in this old traditional garb, and she describes Inuyasha as seeing her even more like Kikyo, to the point she asks him to roll a wisdom save. Confused, he does so, and she describes how it makes him feel a bit uncomfortable. And Inuyasha decides that being around her at the moment isn't best for him. He's itching for combat, but he knows that these two want to do more RP, and he tries his hand at giving them stuff to work with. Eventually, the two separate, and Kagome, playing into her character, goes back into the well. She gets up for the restroom and says Kagome would probably want to see if she can return home, to which the DM lets her. The DM asks Inuyasha to roll initiative. Confused but excited, he rolls high. And the DM describes Inuyasha wandering around the village to see everyone floating, arms outstretched. She asks him to roll perception, and he gets a 20, and is thus able to see the villagers being puppeted on what appear to be strands of hair. It's a unique combat as Inuyasha is told not to hurt the villagers, rather aim for the hair. Inuyasha, while having fun, asks if he should wait for Kagome's player to come back to see what she would do. He's like, it's not like I can follow her to the present, right? To which the DM asks, have you tried? Inuyasha thinks for a moment before jumping into the well. Kagome's player returns and the RP begins. Inuyasha tells her there's a demon he can't stop without her, and she's brought back into the fray. Kagome, with her unique distribution of stats, has a passive perception high enough to always see the hair, and she's able to follow it to the demon Inuyasha has been fighting. Nervous about her stats, Inuyasha asks if he can give her a piece of his armor, saying it has special protections that might help her AC. The DM is like, totally, but you'll get hit more. And I mean, saying this to a barbarian isn't exactly the biggest detriment in the whole world. So he rolls with it. As the fight ensues, Inuyasha keeps getting caught by the hair and is making many dexterity saves, while Kagome is off shooting arrows in the corner. Yura makes attacks on her, but because of the added AC, she's able to shrug off her attacks before landing the final blow on her. The DM describes how this skull Yura carried has a comb inside that was the source of her power as she crumbles, leaving pieces of the jewel behind. The two take a short rest to revitalize themselves, and the DM even lets them level up. As they get resituated, the DM describes Inuyasha being met with someone from his backstory, Myoga. Myoga tells Inuyasha his brother is looking for him, and this sword called the Tetsaiga. Inuyasha, who knows what the sword is about, says they got to find it immediately, both because he wants his weapon, and also he knows this encounter is going to be nasty if Sesshomaru gets his hands on it. Kagome, in the meantime, is itching to meet Inuyasha's brother, unaware of what's about to happen. And she starts role-playing with this new Myoga character. She's asking all sorts of questions, and the DM gets to the point of pulling out Inuyasha's backstory doc and just reading it out loud. After a while, Inuyasha gets bored with it and says, out loud, "Alright, I think that's enough." The two begin to journey, before being confronted with this massive demon holding a woman, with who else but Sesshomaru on the creature's shoulder. The DM describes this woman as looking exactly like Inuyasha's mother. Inuyasha is confused and continues to dismiss that it could be her, to which the DM has this explanation that Sesshomaru took her right from the land of the dead and brought her back. Inuyasha asks if he can tell he's being lied to which the DM asks him to roll insight. Inuyasha gets something like a 13, just enough for a level of uncertainty, but he is told that it is, in fact, his mother. Trying to play more into the group's RP obsession, Inuyasha is overwhelmed with feelings. He attacks Sesshomaru, but before initiative can begin, is consumed by a light produced by Inuyasha's mother. The DM paints the scene of the two sitting at a pond, seemingly away from the conflict. Kagome asks if she can see all this, to which the DM asks her to roll perception, to which Kagome, with her insane perception, does. And she also noticed that Inuyasha's mother's face has no reflection. Confused, she asks if she can know why that is, to which she rolls insight and gets a natural 20 and realizes she's a demon called the Unmother. But before she can interact with Inuyasha, breaking him out of the trance, the DM calls the game off. There's a lot of protest at first, but it's late, and they figure they probably all need some rest. Their availability is very soon anyway, so they can pick up right where they left off. Next session, immediately Inuyasha's rolling insight, trying to see if he can see through the illusion. But because he was so convinced last time, the DC is something pretty high, and he's just not getting what he needs. The DM is also making rolls for this on Mother, and she begins to absorb Inuyasha into her body. Kagome, on the other hand, is trying to roll con saves to break herself out of paralysis. But since Kagome's constitution is kinda low, she also cannot seem to break out of it. The DM's getting a little panicky. She didn't really intend for Inuyasha to die, so she writes how Miyoga breaks Kagome out of paralysis by sucking out a bit of her blood. Kagome sees Jokin, the little imp dude Sesshomaru keeps around, and tries to take his staff, getting an excellent sleight of hand roll, followed by a crit, knocking the little dude into the water. Inuyasha is free, but then Sesshomaru comes back, and the two duke it out once more. Sesshomaru gets Inuyasha into a grapple, before using some sort of magic to pull a black pearl out of Inuyasha's eye. The DM describes Sesshomaru as entering a portal the pearl creates, and our players quickly follow after him. The DM then pulls out this new map, basically a massive boneyard with this huge skeleton in the middle, to which she says that Inuyasha can immediately tell that this is his father's grave. She describes, as the players land on his skull, how Sesshomaru is trying to pull this old decrepit sword out of the ground to no avail. She describes how Sesshomaru can't even seem to place his hands on it. Kagome rolls insight and immediately is able to tell he can't touch the blade due to him being a demon. She tells Inuyasha he should be able to pull it out as a half-demon, and Inuyasha begins to pull. As he does, the DM jokingly asks if he can roll a strength check. But despite Inuyasha's insane strength, he rolls a 1 and fails. Kagome asks if she can give it a shot. Again, also as a joke, but she rolls a 20 and manages to get the sword out. Everyone at the table is laughing their asses off, and Kagome gives Inuyasha the sword. However, he is unable to awaken its power. Inuyasha is a bit confused at first and rolls an Arcana check, to which he learns that the blade's power is sealed by a magic writ of sorts, a promise made by his father, to which Inuyasha goes, "Oh yeah, that was the whole thing I wrote with these swords, wasn't it?" And to satisfy our role players at the table, declares his desire to protect Kagome, thus unlocking the sword's power, and the fight proper begins. Inuyasha manages to de-arm Sesshomaru, literally. But not wanting to kill Sesshomaru yet, the DM describes Jokin taking him and escaping back to the real world, to which our players also do. After that encounter, they've still got some time to kill, so the DM has them encounter a village where the women are being taken to see a prince. Inuyasha and Kagome investigate, find him possessed by some sort of frog demon, to which Inuyasha and Kagome wreck his life. Kagome even improvises a weapon made from a lighter and her hairspray, which makes everyone at the table laugh in shock of the ingenuity. So, the session ends, but the DM asks Inuyasha's player if he knows anybody else who'd be down to join the game. She's like, "I'm getting the hang of this combat thing, let's bring some more people in." To which Inuyasha immediately calls up 3 of his friends, and they all say they can join. But at the moment, 2 of them are out of the state, so only one of them can join next game. Now, we get to Shippo's character. I see this guy as actually the most experienced player here. Like a guy who's played in dozens of campaigns, played all sorts of characters. Somebody who's at the point where he just kind of likes to make joke characters. But he's not really a huge attention seeker either. He wants to make sure the game is enjoyable, especially if he's joining a group with a new DM who's in a relationship with the guy who invited him. So he submits this pitch for Shippo, this trickster cleric fox demon child. Again, as a joke. But surprisingly, the DM loves it, because where most demons in the game have been antagonistic, having a demon with good in his heart would make the world seem less black and white. Shippo's player is like, aight, and gives a brief backstory about these 2 demon brothers who killed his family. And the DM gets so excited about this, she ends up rewriting the next game to be all about a confrontation with the Thunder brothers. Shippo's playing style is somewhere between Inuyasha and Kagome's, where Inuyasha really likes the nitty-gritty rules and Kagome is all about the RP. Shippo knows all sorts of ways to trivialize combat, but he's getting engrossed in the heavy RP world and just kind of likes to screw around. Like, he knows how to be helpful, but he holds back to give his fellow players the spotlight. He's a real Giga Chad in contrast to actual Shippo, who can be kind of a brat. Shippo's settling in well, but can't make the next session, so Kagome's player asks if she can do a session in the present. as it's what her character would probably want to do. While the DM is looking at her notes, full of possessed masks and a soul piper, and she's kind of panicking because she's not sure if she can make it work. And she's texting Inuyasha, who's busy in the restroom, if he's down with the present day RP. And he's like, you could probably work in both encounters into the present. And the DM, realizing she totally can, does so. After that stuff happens, we go back to the past, learning stuff about half-demons, having a day they turn human, which adds additional danger to some days. You know, stuff from the show that's important, but hard to squeeze into a video like this. Meanwhile, our final two players are texting the group with ideas, and both have ties to a similar beast. Miroku writes how he's this monk with this cursed hand given to him by a shape-shifting demon named Naraku, where Sango says the same Naraku tricked her family of demon slayers into slaughtering each other, and all these talks of shape-shifting demons gives our DM an idea. See, as Inuyasha didn't specify too much on the betrayal Kikyo took upon him, what if this Naraku character shape-shifted himself into Kikyo, tricking Inuyasha? And what if he did the same to Kikyo back as Inuyasha? Wouldn't that be interesting? Both are planning on coming, but Sango's player gets sick and can't join. Miroku's player initially hangs back with her, but she insists he go, and he eventually leaves for the game. He misses like half of it though, and thus misses the return of Kikyo. The DM threw her in for not only the drama she'd incite, but also setting up a bit of the backstory she's been working on. Miroku finally arrives and we get his introduction. And it's here the DM reveals Naraku. The demon Miroku claims gave him his wind tunnel also was the creature that split Kikyo and Inuyasha apart via shapeshifting. Everyone at the table is just losing their minds over this revelation, and they all vow to stop Naraku, no matter what it takes. I guess at this point, it only makes sense to talk about Miroku, right? Miroku initially rolls up a cleric till he learns that's what Shippo's going for, and instead opts for a, you guessed it, monk. He wants to play something like a Sun Soul monk, but with the flavor of this wind tunnel, able to vacuum basically anything, at the cost of his own life points. He asks the DM if this idea is okay, kinda unaware she's new to DMing, but since he laid out some pretty clear drawbacks, the DM is okay with it. It isn't until he's actually there on his first game where he realizes he may have gone too far in a few places. Then again, everyone at the table has seemingly overpowered stuff. This table just makes it work. The next game is here, and Sesshomaru is back. The DM describes him as being overly confident and sporting a new arm. The party is unsure what this means until Sesshomaru takes Inuyasha's sword and proceeds to wreck house. Miroku's like, alrighty, let's wind tunnel this bitch. But as he does, Sesshomaru pulls out a new toy, the Saimyosho, that, when absorbed, poison Miroku to the point of debilitation. Hope seems lost, but they're actually able to turn the combat around, with Kagome shooting an arrow at the Tetsaiga that turns it back to normal, thus being able to retrieve it. Kagome is looking for some RP and texts Inuyasha if he'd be willing to do some sort of gesture due to her saving him and all that, to which Inuyasha asks the table if he's okay making this gesture. Miroku and Shippo are kind of expecting it to be a lot more explicit, but are surprised as Inuyasha goes into this emotional tirade, telling Kagome she needs to go back to her own time, and that having to protect her made him afraid. The DM is grinning from ear to ear, so enraptured by this cute interaction, and Kagome's player is even more into it, as she proceeds to feign about wanting to go back to the feudal era and wishing to see Inuyasha again. The DM is bouncing between Kagome and the present with the rest of the party in the past. While this standstill could be seen as boring, in this group's hands, they're highlighting how they all need each other. Everyone's in on the RP. But at some point, the party finds themselves in a combat they can't seem to get out of. Miroku and Inuyasha are doing their best to fend off this beast, while Shippo, with the jewel shards in hand, runs to the well to see if he can bring Kagome back, which has Inuyasha going, wait, what? How did he even get them? To which the DM reveals Shippo made a silent sleight of hand roll to get the shards. So the party is reunited. The DM says it's late, and she hopes how the final player can finally make it. And sure enough, she can. But as the party hasn't traveled to the location she wanted to start with, she's just kind of sitting there for a bit while the rest of the party is having another showdown with Kikyo. Emotions run high, the RP is intense, the DM even has Inuyasha and Kikyo kiss to heighten the drama, to which Inuyasha's character feels a bit awkward having to play into this in front of his friends. But Kagome, trying to de-escalate the situation, has some RP and says how she's going back to the present. Feeling kind of bad out of game for interrupting the party's ability to go see Sango, the DM asked the group if she could just already join the group. But Sango's player has this whole interaction she wanted to have with her family as it's part of why she joins the group, so the DM decides to just focus on her while the rest of the players just chill for a bit. Sango's character is pretty easy, actually. Honestly, the easiest at the whole table. She's a ranger, with demons as her favorite enemy. Ultimately, I'd say she's a Beastmaster Ranger due to Kilala, with Kilala having some of her own unique buffs to not die like most Beastmaster pets. Yeah, Sango was the only person of the group who didn't write something super broken or overpowered, which is probably why she didn't get as much of a time to shine in the show. Oh well. Anyway, in-game, it plays pretty much how you see in the show. Sango shows up, meets Naraku in disguise, who has Kohaku get possessed and kills her entire family, and Sango is forced to contemplate killing her brother before being deceived into thinking the party was responsible. This turns into an intense player-on-player fight, which ultimately ends with Moroku talking Sango down from killing them, as Naraku re-enters with poison. I guess you could say that's his lair effect, and then the group pursuing Naraku. Naraku at this point is described as this twisted nest of wood-like tentacles that Inuyasha decapitates. Thinking they've actually killed him, the group realizes it's a decoy. As the DM describes a scene none of them are able to witness, where the young lord, Naraku, in disguise, sits comfortably in his palace. Everyone at this point is pretty tired, but they've still got time and they want to do a little RP as the whole group is finally together. They're all just kind of combated out at this point. So the DM presents them with this cave that allows the party to enter so long as they have their jewel shards, in which they find this crystal-like statue of a woman fighting a legion of demons, with a hole in her chest. Moroku rolls a history check, and the DM begins reading off a description she made how this woman is Midoriko, who fended off and purified demons until she was met with one she couldn't purify, but managed to trap his soul with her own, thus creating the Shikon jewel. And Moroku is just like, I conveyed this information to the party. Meanwhile, Sango's cat Kilala, who herself is a demon, begins acting strangely, and they all leave. Whew, man. I got a lot more comprehensive than I thought I'd get, to be honest. Hopefully y'all liked it. If you did, feel free to let me know in the comments, as well as anything you think I'd missed, because there's a lot of stuff I kind of had to gloss over. I'm not sure when I'll see y'all again, but I will. Take care of yourselves.